Hard Talk.
Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sacker. Just how stable and sustainable is Israel's coalition government? Prime Minister Netanyahu currently relies on the support of Jewish Home, a right-wing religious Zionist party strongly supportive of the settler movement. What happens to that coalition as the Americans try to push Israel towards a land for peace deal with the Palestinians? Well, my guest is Naftalli Bennett, leader of Jewish Home and Israel's economy minister. Is the Israeli right about to splinter? Naftalli Bennett, welcome to Hard Talk.
Great to be here.
Are you comfortable to be part of an Israeli government which is publicly committed to the search for a two-state peace deal with the Palestinians?
It's a complicated situation. When I joined the government, I told Prime Minister Netanyahu that I realize what his goal is and I won't bother him. He can go ahead and seek the arrangement. If a deal is reached, we bring it to a national referendum, and I'll respect the results, be the whatever they are. So that's sort of the framework of how we can operate while we differ on opinion.
Well, that sounds like a great gentleman's agreement, but it seems to me you've broken it, because just a few weeks ago you said this, and it was plainly said of Mr. Netanyahu. You said, "Our forefathers and descendants will not forgive an Israeli leader who gives up our land and divides our Jerusalem."
That's correct. I mean, our home, Israel has been our home for roughly 3,800 years. Archaeology shows it, the Bible says it, and I think it would be a profound mistake to divide our country. I think we're trying this approach, and it's not working. We've tried it for the past 20 years, and evidently we're bashing our heads again and again, because every time we vacate a piece of land, within days it turns into a launch pad of missiles onto us. We did it in Lebanon, we did it in Judea and Samaria, we did it in Gaza 3 times already. We handed land over to the Arabs, and within days they started shooting at us missiles.
Well, I want to get into your perspective.
It's not working, clearly.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into your perspective on relations with the Palestinians in a minute, but let us just stick, if I may, with relations with Mr. Netanyahu, your boss, the Prime Minister of Israel. You said to me at the very beginning of this interview that you promised not to bother him. Well, you are bothering him, because in essence, what you said about your forefathers and descendants not forgiving a Prime Minister like him, you were, in essence, accusing him of potentially betraying the nation.
No, I'm not accusing anyone of betrayal. I have my opinions.
Well, he thought you were. His office was so furious they demanded an immediate apology.
I'm very happy that Israel is a vibrant democracy and we can debate things, including within the government. We have a very unique political system where, while we're in a coalition, we also have disagreements, and I represent a very wide range of Israelis who think it's a profound mistake to hand over more land to the Arabs and hope that somehow this time it'll bring upon peace and not death as it did each time before.
Did you apologize for essentially, I come back to that word, accusing your own boss, the Prime Minister, of contemplating a betrayal?
No.
He said he would sack you from the cabinet unless you apologize. So either he backed down or you backed down. I'm just trying to figure out which it was.
Sure. Actually, you're referring to a different statement regarding the notion of leaving Israelis under Palestinian control, and I said that that notion is a bad idea.
Yeah, because Mr. Netanyahu, I think it was actually part of the same speech. Yeah. He mooted this idea that as part of a two-state solution, Jewish settlers could remain in their homes and live under Palestinian sovereignty.
Yeah, the only problem is that history also has taught us that every time Jews lived under Arab sovereignty, ultimately they were butchered, and it's not such a good idea. But,
this is the man that you promised you would not intrude and intervene in his peacemaking process. You said you would leave it alone and then you would accept the result of a referendum that might come afterwards. So I come back to this basic point, because it's about the balance of power inside the Israeli government. Either you back down or he backed down. Which was it?
When I said that I would allow the peace talks to happen, they are happening, and Tzipi Livni is meeting Saeb Erekat all the time. I basically said, go into the room, take as much time as you need. If it's 6 days, 6 weeks, or 6 years, bring a deal. But they haven't. It doesn't mean that I have to be mute about my opinions. We're a democracy, and I'll speak up. And I think one of Israel's problems is that we haven't spoken up the truth until now.
Yeah, but you can't just sort of say, oh, well, I'll speak up, but I'll let the process play out. The process involves you because you have serious leverage inside the Israeli coalition government. For example, one specific. We believe, according to sources in the United States, that John Kerry may be looking for a construction settlement freeze from the Israeli government in all of the remoter parts of the West Bank as part of a framework to move this peace process forward. Would you support Mr. Netanyahu if he does contemplate that sort of construction freeze?
I think that stopping anyone from living in our land is a profound mistake. By the way, no one's asking the Palestinians to freeze their building. If it would be a mutual, that would be a mutual construction freeze. That's something that could be thought upon.
Sure, but if you would just address the direct question, will you support, will you accept the concept of a construction freeze as part of Kerry's framework for moving this two-state peace deal forward?
No, of course not. Why should I stop building in my land? It's my home.
So you're saying to Mr. Netanyahu, if he's contemplating such a freeze, it'll be a deal breaker for you and you'll walk out of the coalition?
What I'm saying is, why don't you had now half a year. No demonstrations on the street. You can walk around Israel, everyone's just leading their lives. They had time to reach a deal. You want more time, take more time. Why isn't there a deal to be made? I'll tell you why. Because the Palestinians do not recognize Israel as the Jewish state. It's that simple. They used to say 2 states for 2 peoples. They don't say that anymore. They just say 2 states. Because they want a Palestinian state and then a Palestinian Jewish state. And they're not willing to fundamentally accept Israel as a Jewish state. So why should we?
We've just spoken to Saeb Erekat, the chief Palestinian negotiator, on this program. He says, this is not an issue. We have recognized Israel. We recognized Israel back in 1993 with the Oslo Accords. Recognizing the Jewish nature of the state of Israel is different, says Mr. Erekat, because first of all, there's the issue of the citizenship of the what is it, the hundreds of thousands?
1.5 million.
1.5 million Palestinian Arabs who live as citizens inside Israel, but they're not Jewish. There is also the question of refugees. Unfinished business in the negotiation. What will happen to those 48 refugees or their descendants, some of whom seriously insist that they ought to be allowed back to their ancestors' homes inside your country? So that's unfinished business.
That's exactly the point. I mean, here's what Erekat is essentially saying. Divide the land, give us half of it. First of all, now we've got our Palestinian state. And now let's start debating your half. And let's turn it into a binational state. No, it's got to be the homeland of the Jews. We only have one homeland. The Arabs have 22. There's 300 times the size of our tiny state. I don't know how many of your viewers realize that from the ocean to the Green Line, it's a 10-minute ride. That's how narrow our state is. But he wants a piece of that. What he doesn't get is he needs to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. And yes, we only have one, the Jewish nation only has one state in the world, and that's Israel. But if he wants it to be this multinational state, that means he wants his state, and then the day we sign that deal, he'll begin fighting for the small Jewish state.
Isn't the fundamental fallacy at the heart of your argument this, that you're sort of suggesting to me that you might, if the circumstances were very different, accept a two-state solution, but the fact is you will never accept a two-state solution, because as far as you are concerned, ideologically, all of the land between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River belongs irrevocably to Israel.
Well, first of all,
do you believe that, yes or no?
First of all, it does. I mean, we have, this land has been ours for thousands of years. I just yesterday gave a coin that's 2,200 years old to Martin Schulz as a gift. And it's got Hebrew on it. So we've been in this land way longer than America has been in American land and even British in the British land. I do recognize that in our land there are 2 million Palestinians. They've got aspirations. They're not going anywhere, but we're not going anywhere. So we got to figure out how to live together, how to work it out. And that I do recognize. So, you know, I can't...
But you're not prepared to countenance giving them sovereignty.
Well, because every time we did, they kill us. Would you do that? Would you hand over half of Britain to someone who keeps on killing you? Does that make sense?
So your solution, if I'm trying to tease this out to see what your alternative view to Netanyahu's is, your vision is of 2 million and more Palestinians living in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, permanently stateless.
No, what I suggest is when, you know, I'm a businessman. For 20 years we've tried this direction again and again and again. In 1993, 95, 2000, Ehud Barak was willing to divide Jerusalem, give them 97%, and you know what they did? They killed 1,000 Israelis as a result. It's not working.
Well, we aren't going to trade death tolls during this interview.
It's time to try a different approach. When something doesn't work, bring in a new dimension. Bring in a creative dimension. How about getting Jordanian involvement, regional involvement? It's not working. And I know that there's this common knowledge as if that's the only solution, but they're wrong. It's not working. I'm a rational person. When I see something not working, I try something else. That something else is peace between the people. I'm the Minister of Economy of Israel. I'm building day in, day out businesses in Judea and Samaria of Palestinians and Israelis together. You've not been there for a while, but I'll tell you that all across, from Barkan, Ariel, Ma'ale Adumim, there's more and more businesses and economy, and that's the real bridge to peace. Build it bottom up, because clearly the diplomats are failing.
I have actually been there very recently. I don't live there anymore, but I still visit very frequently.
Then I offer you a personal tour, and I'll show you. You got to see what's going on. It's beautiful. It's good for the Palestinians. It's good for the Israelis. Let's not ruin it all.
I wonder whether you have any idea what's going on inside Palestinians' heads and hearts. Because when you tell me that it's beautiful and that Palestinians are going to accept this idea that they live stateless under Israeli sovereign control forever, it seems to me that is illusory. It is never going to happen.
Well, clearly you understand Palestinians better than I guess, but what you don't understand is what it means to be killed again and again when you hand over land. Now, you tell me, what would you do if every time you hand over land to the Arabs, from that very location, they shoot missiles at your home?
Here's what
would you do it again? Would you do it for the fourth time?
Just address this point from Peter Beinart, who's an influential American Jewish commentator on
and anti-Israeli,
but that's anti-Israeli.
Yes, he is.
He writes about Israel with a deep knowledge of Israel. And this is what he wrote recently. He said, to be a Zionist and refuse a two-state deal, you have to believe that the Palestinians will ultimately embrace their disenfranchisement and lose their will to fight. And that, he says, is the real naivety.
Well, you know, the difference between Mr. Beinart and myself is I've unfortunately fought in every battle in Israel since 1990.
And you want your children and grandchildren to fight battles in their lives too?
The contrary. The contrary. I've lost my best friends in battle. In the first Intifada, the second Lebanon War, it's my kids who will need to pay the price for the naivete. And I'm telling you that 1,000 people blew up in Tel Aviv and Haifa and Jerusalem when we did hand over land. And you know what happened? I had to fight back and recapture to stop terror on Israeli streets. But you seem to be ignoring that by asking these questions. I think it's vital.
I don't ignore the suffering and the loss on both sides. I wonder if you ever put yourself in the place of a Palestinian and look at their experience since 1948. I think back to some of the phrases you've used in the past when you were having a highly contentious debate with Ahmed Tibi, the Arab member of Knesset in 2010. You said this: you were still climbing in trees when we had a Jewish state here. I just wonder, when you talk about the Palestinians, do you really have any empathy?
I have immense empathy. and Ahmed Tibi had falsely said that they were here before us. That term, I guess, could be used better.
Arabs climbing in trees?
No, clearly that's not the case, but we were here way before
Why did you
Muslims
say it?
came.
You see, Palestinians listen to that sort of language
I know.
and they feel that politicians like yourself...
When you can focus again and again on that term or on the reality. And the reality is we've got a tiny home, one home for the Jews. We don't have anywhere else to go. The Arabs who have 22 states, much bigger, and that's it. That's what we've got. That's what we've had forever. We're a democracy, one democracy in the Middle East, where we have a Supreme Court, freedom of speech. Ahmed Tibi, he's an Arab Israeli out of 1.5 million. He's a member of our parliament. Show me in Saudi Arabia a Jewish member of parliament. Show me in Jordan. Show me in Syria. Show me in Lebanon. We're the only democracy in the entire Middle East who really gives free rights and equal rights to women. We don't... anyone can speak up in Israel, and everyone does.
Here's the reality. You and your ideology are out of step with your own Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu. You're certainly out of step with people like Tzipi Livni, who are spearheading the Israeli peace negotiation team. You're out of step also with the international community and, most important of all, the Obama administration. And as a result of being out of step with all of those people, it seems you are ready to contemplate Israel's diplomatic and economic isolation. You really ready for that?
It's quite the contrary. First of all, the fact that a lot of people think something doesn't make it right. History teaches us that common wisdom is correct about 50% of the time. And the fact that everyone thinks that the right thing to hand over land to my enemy and hope that somehow this time they won't...
We've gone through that argument. Let's now rehearse. Let's rehearse the dangers for Israel.
However, I want to tell you one thing.
And diplomatic
you talk
isolation.
about... I know. You're talking about the entire world. Let me tell you who I do have. The Israeli public. The younger generation is flocking to my party because they look at reality, not from Washington, D.C., not from London, from ground up. And we see reality. Believe me, the Israeli people were willing again and again to divide our country to get peace, but we got terror instead. We have to look at reality. And there are other ways. But no, everyone's insisting again and again to bash our heads, create a third intifada. I will tell you that if we want to be internationally isolated, if we want to have war in this region, let's set up a hostile state in our heart.
Right.
You'll see it happen.
See, I'm not talking about bashing heads. I'm talking about people outside of Israel looking at the policies of the Israeli government and deciding that they're going to pursue a policy which might include divestment, might include, at some point, sanctions. Some are even talking about boycotts. Now, there are many Israelis, including business leaders, who have met with your Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and said, we must make a peace, a compromise deal with the Palestinians, because we cannot afford not to.
Yeah. I would ask those business people, how will Israel's economy look the first time a plane is shot down from the West Bank, which is 4 kilometers from Ben Gurion Airport? I would ask them, how will our economy and tourism be when we get just 2 missiles a day into Tel Aviv? Not the 10 missiles we get into Sderot, just 2 a day. So I understand the desire for peace. I have a desire for peace bigger than theirs. But at the end of the day, we have to face reality. We don't live in La La Land. We live in a real place.
What the reality
we
is.
live in a real place.
The reality.
And anyone who thinks of divesting or boycotting is Israel, that is outrageous. We've got apartheid going on in Lebanon, apartheid going on in Syria. In Syria, they butchered 100,000 people. In Iran, you're killed if you protest. In Israel, the only place of freedom, that's what you're going to boycott? Where there's 1.5 million Arabs, Israeli Arabs?
If I may, interesting you introduced the word apartheid. Obviously reminds people about South Africa and the sanctions campaign against the apartheid regime in South Africa. These are the words of Yadin Kaufman, who is a senior industrialist with Sadara Ventures, an important Israeli company. It's reminiscent, Yadin Kaufman says, reminiscent of the outcry against South Africa in the 1970s. And we need to learn the lesson of what happened then, because these things start small, but they quickly gather momentum. The reality is, and your business leaders are telling you as Minister of Economy, that Israel cannot afford to be economically isolated.
We're not economically isolated. The fourth quarter of 2013 was the best high-tech quarter in Israel's recorded history. Last week we sold a company for $900 million, Viber. We've got the strongest economy, and by the way, that economy is trickling down to the Palestinians as well. So I don't buy all that talk about...
It's not talk. I mean, with all due respect, it's not talk. Are you aware that one of Holland, the Netherlands' biggest pension funds has already backed out of investment in 5 Israeli banks? You're of course aware that the EU has already imposed a ban on grants and loans to institutions that have operations in the West Bank. You know all this.
Yeah, so I'll tell you. First of all, if someone doesn't want to invest beyond the green line, so be it. You know, I clearly there is a debate. The land is disputed. There are different opinions than my own, and I can't tell a European country where to invest and where not. That's their prerogative. However, suggesting boycotting Israel would be, by the way, also self-defeating, because your cell phone has a Intel inside or a chip inside, your computer does, the stent in your heart is Israeli, the irrigation system is Israeli, the navigation system is Israeli. You can try that. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yair Lapid, fellow minister in your cabinet, says failed Palestinian peace talks will hit every Israeli in their pocket. Israel's economy, he says, is much more vulnerable than its security, and that is the truth.
So, you know, yesterday I was at a summit at the EU of economy ministers around the world. Everyone wants to see, how do we build another startup nation? How do we get this innovation, this unique innovation that we have in Israel? And we're helping out in India, in Africa, all around the world. We're doing amazing things. The way to grow an economy is to continue innovating, continue building jobs, creating jobs around the world.
I'm sure you talk to people like Yehuda Brunitsky from Ormat Industries, high-tech company. He says, look, our tech sector doesn't make us in Israel invulnerable. The software sector can be hit. It's very easy for companies to move across borders.
Yeah.
I don't know who you talk to, but the people in your own country at the top of business are now getting worried.
That's very interesting, because just over the past years, Google set up shop in Israel. Microsoft, Facebook has now set up shop. Israel has more R&D centers of multinationals than any other country in the world.
They don't have to stay.
So they don't have to stay, but they're coming.
They're in a country which right now is engaged in a search for a two-state peace deal. You were saying that peace deal must never happen.
The only problem with your approach is that it has nothing to do with reality. Beyond that, it's perfect. Because what's happening day in and day out, we're getting more foreign investment into Israel because people appreciate our economy and respect our being the only democracy in the Middle East. Don't forget that for one moment. Show me any other country that treats its minority the way we do. We're not blowing up mosques or like others are blowing up churches. We respect everyone. I know it's hard for you to recognize that, but we're a free country.
We're close to running out of time. There's 2 more points I just want to put to you very quickly. One is about relations with the United States. You care deeply about the United States.
I do.
Your own parents came to Israel made Aliyah from the United States to Israel. Would you accept that relations between the United States government and Israel right now are at their lowest ebb? They're poisonous.
Not at all. America's our biggest ally. We have deep intelligence and economic relationships between, it's our #1 trade partner. I myself live there.
From Robert Gates' recent
and I can tell you that we do have disagreements. We do have disagreements, and that's okay. Friends can disagree, even have profound disagreements. But America is a good friend, as is Britain, by the way.
Good friend?
Yes.
Have you read Robert Gates' memoirs?
Listen, I can read one opinion and I can read another opinion. I know that your job is to pinpoint what certain people think, and I'm telling you that I see de facto more American investment coming into Israel, more American intelligence collaboration with us. And yes, we do have disagreements on the Palestinian issue, on the Iranian issue. It's okay. Friends can disagree.
All right. We have to leave it there. Naftalli Bennett, thank you for being on Hard Talk.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.